grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Last week we were talking with Thomas Graham, who is a South African-born adoptee who migrated to Australia 25 years ago and in 2009 started the Australian Journal of Adoption, an online journal providing an independent open access forum for people affected by or involved in adoption. He published 16 volumes focusing on adoptee experiences before hanging up his hat. After the journal, he published an adoption blog called Ipsify for 3 years, offering shorter and personalised interviews and commentary on adoption matters. He was also part of the grassroots adoptee groups that helped set the path for what is now known as the Adoptee Rights Australia. In addition, Thomas once ran a Canberra-based adoption support group, sat on the government committee to oversee the implementation of some key recommendations in the Senate report into forced adoption, and then by his own account disappeared and withdrew from any involvement in the adoption community. This is part 2 of the conversation that I had with Thomas Graham. I think sometimes in life, Thomas, we can identify periods of change that can have a really seismic feel to them. I know certainly I have in my life, where you can sort of look back and see how life has changed drastically. And you've already kind of described one of those instances to us after you met Dorothea. But have you experienced any other sort of seismic shifts like that? And how did your life change as a result?
Yeah, you touched on, I'll just reiterate, my post-adoption experience, when I mentioned hitting rock bottom and migrating to Australia, that was a big seismic shift.
Yeah.
In my 10 years of voluntary work, with AJA, Ipsify and support groups, I found that I had a more authentic self after that. And at age 58, I felt that I needed to do something for myself. And I was confident that I could do it. So I did a crazy thing. I gave up the comfort and security of a permanent well-paid job in the ABS, and I decided to start my own small little business called Mr. Petman, and that gave me an opportunity to sort of be me, where I could be independent, doing something outdoors. I always loved the outdoors. What Mr. Petman did was build cat enclosures, because here in the ACT, if you have a cat, it has to be on your property at all times, so it's not allowed to wander. And so I built over 400 enclosures, spending most of my days in the back gardens of people's homes or on their balconies. And I really loved the creative side of designing and building and working with my hands, and leaving happy owners and happy cats at the end of it. And also it was essentially designed to have a minimal impact on nature, the birds and the other creepy crawlies, and so that was one of the reasons why I disappeared, where, I withdrew from all things adoption, because I just wanted to do something, in my new authentic version of myself, if I might say. And I'm very pleased that I did. And then the other sort of spur at that time was the death of William Hammersley Ellis. Now, he was a fellow adoptee. He was one of the key figures in setting up the organisation that we know as Adoptee Rights Australia. And he was also the first person in the state of Victoria to have his adoption discharged under a no fault, no fee, no fuss arrangement. And he was the last story that I posted on Ipsify, my blog, and I remember he came up to Canberra he was searching for some lost relatives, and we had a day and we just talked and talked. And when he passed away, it was kind of a line in the sand for me, that maybe I should just step back a bit, and that's what I did. So, and then I made my focus on Mr. Batman, and as I said, after I did that for 6.5 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then, as I was getting older, I was working like a 35-year-old in a 65-year-old body, and the two weren't it wasn't the best. So I decided I'd stop, and Mr. Batman, and I set about writing a memoir. Well, that's what I set out to do, and I started that last July, and for 8 months, I did all this research and writing, and then my memoir writing was interrupted by two significant events earlier this year. One was Dorothea, my mother, passing, and then in May I was kind of blindsided, and I suffered a serious stroke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just might need a moment just to.
It's okay, take all the time you need, Ty.
I suffered a serious stroke, and I was in hospital for 3 weeks, and I basically lost my mobility to my right-sided limbs. And I've been in recovery since in the last 4 months, and restoring movement to my arm and hand and leg and foot, and rebuilding my strength.
Yeah. Your recovery has been incredible. I mean, nothing short of incredible.
I mean, losing my able-bodiedness for a period was it was very confronting and scary.
Yeah, I bet.
And fortunately, my speech, my cognition, and my memory were unaffected. And I managed through intensive physiotherapy to regain all my functional movement as you can see on the screen, I can, where I had, lost use of my right arm and hand. I've managed to restore it all.
Yeah.
So
our listeners wouldn't know that you were, prior to the stroke, I mean, you were a long distance hiker, 72 kilometers over 3 days, and seriously fit, which has probably played a really big part in your recovery.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't tick the boxes for a typical stroke victim.
Yeah.
Because I was fit, I was healthy, I was, my heart was fine, my cholesterol wasn't, high, I was active, I wasn't obese, all the typical factors that you would normally associate with a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have, so apart from age and maybe not handling stress as best as I could. So it was completely out of the blue and a huge shock. And yes, because I was probably physically fit and active, my recovery has been quite rapid.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I was in hospital, I mean, one of the things that one of the side effects of having a stroke is that my emotional regulation is not as controllable as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that would account for, me losing it a little bit here emotionally. And so, yeah, and also with my laughter as well. Sometimes I find that a bit more harder to, to control. So, but yeah, when I went into hospital and after a week we started rehab, we had to set some goals and I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to be able to go home. I wanted to walk out, and I wanted to feed myself, with a spoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to do all those things. And then over the last few months, I'm pretty much active again in terms of walking and I was swimming and things. Yes, I've still got a long way to go, but it's quite miraculous, how much I have regained and restored.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that. And I mean, and you're an incredible writer. I mean, you shared, like, with myself and other friends and family, I think, different pieces that you'd written during your time of recovery. And I mean, you are a stunningly beautiful writer. And I know that this period has kind of been a little misstep with the writing of a memoir. But I do hope that you come, when you're ready, back to the writing, because we're really going to miss out if you don't.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I mean, my urge to write and express myself through writing, I think that's where I feel most comfortable, rather than speaking. And writing has always been a comfort for me. And it's always, I mean, we know now that journaling and writing is therapeutic. it's medically proven that it's good for your health and well-being. And in hospital, where my dominant hand was affected, I could only use my left hand. I typed poems with my one finger on my left hand. So that need to write and express and my feelings, that's how strong, it was, that even though I was incapacitated, I had one finger, and that's what I used.
When writing memoir or anything for that matter, many writers, and I include myself in this, really struggle finding their voice. And I think for adopted people, it might even be like a little bit more, because even kind of figuring out who we are can be quite difficult. Can you tell me what finding the writer's voice means to you and how you went about finding yours?
Yeah, well, as you touched on, I mean, as adopted people, we do have to find ourselves, and we have to find ourselves literally, figuratively, genetically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And as we travel through life, seeking what was taken from us, but also adapting to what was given to us, but in an unrelated sense. So, we have to find and recreate an authentic self, that person who is whole and complete and has an identity, we have our own voice. In the sense of that, it's a unique audible signature, to express ourselves. And it's an ongoing journey and of self-discovery that is often confusing and challenging, as we create the sense of who we are, and we include, our values and our beliefs and our passions and our preferences. And it took a long time to find mine, and I'm still developing it. And when writing my memoir, I always found it difficult to write myself into my own story.
Mm-hmm.
I always, I tended to focus on others and external events and processes rather than myself. And, just on that, in the past, I would often refer to myself in the third person when I spoke. It's using the word one instead of me or I. And when talking about myself, and this often annoyed my wife, Slabadanka, who would say to me, "Why can't you use the word I and me? Why do you always use this neutral, invisible one?" And I suppose that's symbolic of the adoption experience of never really having a strong, firm identity, unless we work at it and create it. And so, as I said to you before, writing's always been therapeutic for me. It was always a go-to. When I was younger, I kept diaries and journals, and they essentially were my friends, my confidence. And so in developing my voice, I try to incorporate head, heart, and spirit into what I write. So to cover mind, what I'm thinking, my heart, what emotions I'm feeling and need to express, and what is emerging out of my spirit in terms of the meaning and value of the experience. And what I've learned recently is that brevity in poetry can be a more potent and effective medium than lengthy narrative. And to give you an example, in February this year, I flew to a tiny village on the other side of the globe, in the middle of winter, to visit Dorothea, my 90-year-old mother, on her deathbed. And 4 days after I returned, she passed away. Now, in those final sittings with her, they're very precious and irreplaceable life experiences, and I'm immensely thankful that I went, and I could spend time with her. So, in the previous 8 months, and when I was researching and writing my story, I'd written, I think, 120,000 words in my first draft. But on this day, my final day of being with Dora, I captured my experience and my feelings and my emotions in 250 words.
Wow.
And it was what I was thinking at the time, including my memories. It was what I was feeling in my heart. I was sad, obviously, and I was also, thankful for being there, and it was an amazing spiritual experience that, could never be repeated, and it won't be forgotten. And when I sort of step back and I think about the intent of the closed adoption system on my life, I'm reminded of that cruel physical act of being removed and separated from Dorothea, my mother at birth, and the deliberate and the established intent was that we would never know. I would never know her identity nor meet her again once I was legally processed and given a new name and family, and my personal records were closed. And those who orchestrated this adoption system had this belief that I would forget her and had no desire to know or be with her again. And they got that totally wrong, as they failed to recognize and underestimated that indivisible nature of mother-child connection. To illustrate that inseparable bond, I'd like to have a go at maybe reading that poem. Which, as I said, I wrote on the final day I spent with her, and because I think it conveys, what it means to find a voice, or my voice. I've been a little more emotional to this point than I probably more than I expected to be, and maybe more than I'm comfortable with. But I'd still like to have a go, and we'll see how it turns out. So it's, I titled it Mutter, Mother, and I kind of wrote it in two parts, and it came out pretty quickly, in about half an hour, the first part, and then I went to visit her, and going there, I had to walk through this forest. It was a beautiful setting, even though it was the middle of winter. And I mean, the few times that my mother and I actually met, the one thing we did enjoy doing, and that was walking together. So I wrote it prior to going, and then the ending is what I wrote when I came back. So I'll have a go. Mutter, Mother, I've come to Luton Sea to say farewell to Mother, to acknowledge her life, to thank her for mine. Frail, fragile, immobile, her voice broken, lying restlessly in her bed. There is only fragmentary recognition of me. Still, there is life holding on. I speak, tell stories, hold her hand, kiss her forehand, play music, sit together in respectful solitude, remembering Johannesburg, Pretoria. When alone and pregnant, she talked to me, wishing, hoping, plotting to keep me. To no avail, I was taken. Adoption intervened, separation, loss, togetherness, our lives divided. I ached inside, longing for belonging. I knew nothing but remembered everything. I did not forget nor gave up hope. 32 years pass. I search, find. We reunite, mother and son, two strangers together. The curse of adoption been of, but unfamiliar. Lies framed, formed, fabricated with others, good people. I am, yet someone else. That is confusing. Who am I now? Who are we when together again? Our reality, geographical distance, emotionally distant, seeking warmth, a closer connection, parallel lives lived apart. Mother is mother, mother is life. Despite the gaps in time, in place, in absence of shared memory, I come to bid farewell in gratitude, with love. I go now. I return. It is done. The final farewells. Thank you, she said. Now it is left to me to fully live the life she's given me. Danke, meine Mutter.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, you did well. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, as we think about our adoption experience and how we started our lives, being separated and taken from our mothers, things, an event that she didn't want to happen and we didn't want to happen, and yet the system allowed it to happen. And, as I touched on, the intent, where we were not ever to know who she was or to meet again, and our records were sealed, and for so much of our lives we've had to chase and search and demand our records, our own personal information, which others have kept under lock and key, and in parts of the world still do. There's some states in America where adopted people are still not entitled to their personal information, and that's a tragedy, and it's shocking. And today people do have the DNA option, but that in itself is not necessarily easy or always provides an answer. So, for me, 66 years where I could fly across the world to be with my mother when, in her final hours was huge. It was huge. We were never destined to not be with our mothers and our first families. And that's not in any way being disrespectful to adopted families, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, I had a very generous, loving, and kind adopted family. I got there by default, not choice. Or I'm just immensely thankful that I was able to spend those last few days with Dorothea.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you were able to do that as well, and it's so important if you can. As we wrap up, Thomas, adoptees, by virtue of their life's journey, sometimes get downcast or despondent about their circumstances, as adoption is not a once at birth event. It's something that stays with us lifelong, and its impacts are often challenging. Given your experience of the highs and lows that come with living life, what would your words of wisdom to adoptees, particularly those of us from the closed adoption era, be as to how we can care, cherish, and celebrate ourselves in our lives?
I mean, we have a unique life to live like everyone else, and we need to embrace it and value it and live it. I mean, given the nature of our experience, we are incredibly resourceful, and resilient. We have to be amongst the best detectives in the world in seeking, information and king. We don't give up when it comes to finding out what is rightfully ours. And the fact that we know what it's like to be sometimes living on the margins or ignored or not listened. And as a consequence, we understand, what hurt and harm and struggle look and feel like. That makes us, gives us the ability to be empathetic, helpful, and kind. And it's amazing how many adoptees have caring, facilitation, and mediation roles. We have this capacity to help and guide others. But I think on top of that, we also need to be kind and compassionate to ourselves, and combining those head and heart and spirit to share our gifts with the world. And I think we're often told to be grateful and to express gratitude for being given in new families and opportunities. And with regard to adoption, we're often told, to get over it, get a grip on life, move on, and forget your past, And I'm certainly not going to ask adoptees to be grateful for being separated and losing their mother's families and heritage at birth, as if they never existed. That would invalidate a vital part of who we are. But what I do ask is that we cultivate gratitude and appreciation for all those good things that life presents, including what we have built despite our challenging beginnings. Because, gratitude for life itself and all its small wonders and pleasures enhances well-being and connection with others. So, we need to embrace it. We need to value it rather than let it slip through our grasp. And a good place to begin is to be kind to ourselves and to reach out to others if we feel the need. I remember, at the end of December last year, after 6 months of research and writing my first draft for my memoir, I was emotionally tired and spent. And I just happened, to type memoir and trauma into Google. And among the sources that popped into my screen was your name. Your name and thesis, and, as you know, we haven't had contact for, up to 9 years. And I thought, Joanne Sparrow, I know that. I know that name, it rang a bell. And I remember I looked in my old emails and I found an email address, and I sent you an email, and I said, do you remember me? Yeah. And you said, of course I do. And I sent you a poem that I'd written about primal wounds, and ultimately, that reconnection led to today's podcast, and I'm very thankful for that.
Oh my!
So yeah, I didn't necessarily expect this discussion we had to be as emotional as it's turned out. And as I said, post-stroke, I have a little difficulty in regulating my emotions. So partly blame it on that.
I think it's so important though, because there's so many men have trouble expressing their emotions.
Yeah.
And so to be able to hear a man who is able to express them is going to be really important for them, I think. And and of course, I remembered you. You're such a wise soul, Thomas. Like from the first time that we ever had a connection through AJ, through the journal, and over the years here and there, you've just always had such a wisdom. And when I think of gratitude and put it anywhere near the word adoption, which I hate doing, it's really to do with like some of the amazing people that adoption has brought into my life. In the adoption community is a huge part of that. And there are some people who I've met who have profoundly shaped who I am and the way I think. And I am truly grateful for them being in my life. And I certainly count you as one of those.
Well, thank you. And it's been a year, a traumatic year, and it's been a dramatic last hour. So,
it has. You'll be looking forward to hanging up. He's like, get rid of this Joanne. Why did I connect with her again?
So I'm not sure how this will all pan out and sound on the podcast, but I think, as you said, expressing raw emotion can be important, necessary sometimes. So
Well, and it's authentic. What we're
Um,
talking about is really big stuff,
Yeah,
traumatic stuff. Like, it would be wrong to not be emotional talking about it. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. No, you did right. And I know you wanting to rush off as well because I think you're going on holiday tomorrow or
I am
later
going on
this week.
holiday. I cannot wait.
So yeah, I wish you and your family well on your holiday, and I think you're
Thank
going
you.
to Tasmania, which I always like, and
Yeah, love
I've
Tasmania.
done some beautiful walks there, and I certainly hope to get back there again. And I very much appreciate the opportunity
Thank you.
to talk today.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. As I said, I know there's a lot of people who will know you or remember your name and who will, like I have, really appreciated much more about the person that sat behind these really great sources that gave us a vehicle to find our voices and put our stories out there. And people can still go and look at the Adoption Journal of Australia, and also the Ipsify websites. And I'll put links for those up on our Jigsaw Queensland website on our podcast notes page so that people can go and have a look, because they still stand mighty in this community, I have to say.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. And
Thank
to our
you.
listeners, thank you for joining us today. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with us and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, please jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And just note that Adopt Perspective can be and is listened to by people all over the world. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you're calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.